Konnichiwa, and welcome to a new edition of Inside Grand Prix. And it's the Japanese Grand Prix we focus on today. But first, let's get to know Japan. Its symmetrical, volcanic shape makes it one of the most beautiful mountains in the world. Over 3,780 meters high, Mount Fujisan in Japan, Fuji for short. The Japanese endearingly call their country Nihon, which roughly means land of the rising sun. Almost 130 million people live in the island empire. And in addition to its culture, rich in tradition, a major sport event of the modern era is held here once a year, namely the spectacle that is Formula One.
I think they are special and the fans are really excited about Formula One. When we arrive there, they support a lot all the sports, but especially Formula One, and it's always good to race there, but there are a lot of Toyota and Honda fans, so it's not very good for us. But you know, it's always very good to go to Suzuka.
Japan's capital, Tokyo, is on the east of Honshu Island in the Kanto region. The pulsating life here is shaped by the city's population of around 8.4 million. Be it sushi, tea ceremonies, or faith and religion that you want to see close up, it's possible in Japan, unlike almost anywhere else in the world. For in Tokyo, tradition and modernity sit closely side by side. From a Western perspective, it's a very interesting lifestyle, and sometimes one that also needs some getting used to.
For example, I had once a day just like the Japanese, sleeping on the mattress the way they do, eating the way they do, and it's very different. I mean, it's really raw fish and everything. I mean, we don't have the chance to actually experience that. I mean, if we go to Thailand, for example, we have to be careful because of the pepper and everything. I mean, it could be too heavy for us.
This will be Suzuka's last year as the venue for the Japanese Grand Prix. From 2007, the Fuji Speedway will again become a firm fixture in the race calendar, even though a lot of drivers will miss Suzuka and its special charm. The circuit's insanely cool. It's got everything a driver needs. Very fast corners, lots of G-force, and the S's. The S-bends behind the pits. They can be taken incredibly aggressively, so you don't actually brake. It's only the skidding wide that slows the car down. Would-be victors here need to sit firmly in the saddle or the cockpit. After victory, tighten your helmet strap, says a Japanese proverb, for another battle will surely come, including that for the crown of Formula One. Coming up in Safety Focus, strategy and tyre selection when it rains. But first, a lap around the circuit just outside Suzuka. The Formula One circus is moving on to the main Japanese island of Honshu. The race is being run at the Suzuka International Racing Course. Built by Honda, it's a high-speed circuit with lots of subtleties. It's flat out from the start. Then the very first corner offers an early chance to overtake. With a good balance between speed and traction, we're on the way into the really tough first section.
First sector in Suzuka is very challenging because you have a lot of S's following each other, and they get slower and slower the further in you go. The speed, you have to just lose a little bit of speed the further in you go, but your line has to be absolutely perfect to get this whole section right. And then the last corner when you're leaving Dunlop curve is very quick. So it's the tempo in that first sector is very impressive.
We navigate carefully through the S-bends, having to be very precise as we've got to get the perfect line. Otherwise, we'll pick up lots of dirt and lack that all-important grip. With composure and a fine touch on the accelerator, we speed at 300 kilometers an hour through the elongated Dunlop curve. Then the track runs beneath itself, a unique feature in the race calendar. The following hairpin bend is the circuit's slowest point. First gear, braking hard, a place to overtake. It's flat out towards the spoon, but be careful braking as the car becomes light at the rear and there's a risk of oversteer. Maximum speed out of the last corner is the guarantee for a fast time in this section. After the crossover comes a legendary corner, the 130R, a brute of a bend, because as you approach it you've got 8 seconds on the straight going flat out, and in the car these 8 seconds are an awfully long time to dwell on things. Shall I go full throttle or lift off? Am I a coward or brave? Is the car okay? Will there be any dirt on the track? All of that goes through your mind. Then you enter the corner and feel the bumps. The car bounces about a lot because you naturally have to run it very low to give it the best possible aerodynamics. However, this feedback is annoying for the driver. But in the end, you've got to push on through, bite the bullet and put the pedal to the metal. It always turns out okay, but you've certainly got to be brave. Now we're racing towards the final chicane, cutting the corners and taking as much momentum as possible onto the home straight. Every year so far there's been lots of excitement on this circuit. Incidentally, the only one in the calendar laid out as a figure of 8. Next in legends, Formula 1 30 years ago. And now in personal, Japanese influences in Formula 1. The Japanese love Formula 1. It's as if it were made for them, and for that there are many reasons. Glamour, action, high-tech, and national pride. Because there are currently 2 Japanese manufacturer teams, Honda and Toyota, Formula 1 is very popular in Japan. His Japanese rival sees things the same way.
I think it's very important, otherwise we wouldn't be in it. And there is a lot of research that shows that Formula 1 has a lot of value, and we certainly think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Honda began in 1964 as a works team. Richie Ginter got their first win in 1965. The 80s was a golden era. Senna and Prost won one world title after another, Honda being the engine supplier to McLaren. In 2006, the comeback as a works team. Toyota, by contrast, are a relatively new team. They made their debut in 2002. Japanese roots with a German base. Their Formula 1 HQ is in Cologne, but the working style is Japanese through and through. Well, Japanese people who are working in Formula 1 take their job extremely seriously. That they find it very difficult to relax. The Japanese world is focused on being very orderly and totally thorough. Japanese precision's regarded as exemplary, as are their new working methods. The team ethos is always to the fore. Plus, of course, a due portion of ambition.
Certainly the Honda culture, I think, is well suited to Formula 1, It's basically never stop looking for more, constant evolution, always looking for more and better solutions. And I think that's well suited to the fast development pace of Formula 1.
All that's missing is a top Japanese driver. Takuma Sato was the great hope, a Japanese driver and a Japanese team. But while he showed glimpses of talent at Honda, his one podium finish was well below expectations. And things are unlikely to get any better with the third Japanese team, Super Aguri, even though hope springs eternal. For sure, we want to have a Japanese champion, but it will take some more time, maybe another 2 or 3 years. Honda and Toyota, they carry the hopes of a nation. And what a party it would be if a Japanese team were indeed to win in Japan. Coming up in Safety Focus, driving safely in the rain. And now in Techno, trust is good, but quality control is better. If a car's well thought out, if it's been developed over many months, if ideas have been cast aside and revised anew, that's one job done. The other is quality and ensuring it's achieved. But without the highest of quality standards applied to materials, even the best built car can't run forever, and certainly not in Formula One. Setting the highest of standards starts with the choice of raw materials, which are checked and tested in advance.
And then we also have an optical spectrometer where we monitor the composition of the alloys. So that's a small test where we need an area of a €1 coin, and we take a sample piece of the delivery, strike a spark across onto that surface, and then the spectrometer will give you a readout of the basic composition. So that's a rough check, and every piece of metal that goes on to make a car component gets checked in that way.
The raw material used is generally up to aerospace standards. From this, they make the individual components. From then on, quality is measured against know-how and actual implementation as well. The individual departments check their products repeatedly, such as this cylinder head, the inner depths of which are inspected using an endoscope. However, the quality of materials is next to worthless if the people involved are not fully on board. The philosophy here is to get everyone working for the common good. How well that can work, and above all how important this aspect is something Renault has demonstrated superbly over recent years and many races.
Quality control is something that is contributed to by almost everybody in the organisation. We try and actively encourage people in the organisation to take ownership of whatever it is they're doing or responsible for. So when a designer designs a component, we encourage them not to forget that component once he's handed over the engineering drawing to make it. We actively encourage him to follow through the life of that component, its manufacture, its use on the car, so that he really understands what the quality issues on that component are.
Component suppliers are also set incomparably high standards of quality. Particularly apt here is the motto, to trust is good, to check is better. Each wheel alloy, which may be used in a race, is first precisely measured down to the last micrometer. If anything's not exactly right, vibrations, for example, could later cause components to break. Nobody wants to fail to finish. The key rules from the moment of the first material delivery are therefore check, test, and if need be, improve. Time for a short break, but we'll be right back with our news and facts. In Safety Focus, how does Formula One adapt to rain? Don't go away. Welcome back to Inside Grand Prix. Coming up, news and facts. But first, in Safety Focus, beware, slippery when wet. By no means is there always a clear blue sky over Formula One. And the teams can rarely rely on the weather forecast. If something's brewing, it can very quickly turn to rain. Even the cleverest of team strategies then takes a bath. So everyone then has their own particular opinion on the weather.
in den letzten Jahren hat man immer wieder gesehen, dass die Teams...
We've seen over and over again in recent years that even though the teams all have their own meteorologists and weather radar,
Wetterradar verfügen, wenn's hart auf hart geht.
when push comes to shove, they don't all put their faith in the same forecasts. My personal view is that you also need a certain sense of feel.
Dass das ein bisschen Gefühl dazu gehört.
Wet weather races are always a very special spectacle for the spectators. Exciting duels and a race order that's always changing. New braking points, less grip, slippery curbs. Any idea of routine is simply washed away. For the drivers in their open cockpits, it's much more than just an uncomfortable weekend. Where it gets really tricky, of course, is during the race. Things get really extreme because if it's raining and you're in the pack and there's lots of spray, you can't see anything at all. You don't know where the car in front is, or the one to your right. You know absolutely nothing. You've got to charge through almost blind. Lap times, however, stay firmly in focus. A job for the tires. On a wet track, 4-groove slicks don't provide enough grip. Intermediates offer greater negative tread. Wets, however, have even more drainage grooves. And a softer rubber compound provides better grip still. If it starts to rain during a race, the teams know what's needed. Unscheduled pit stops to change the tires. The teams must then also adapt the fueling strategy and set up accordingly.
Between the tyres, the aero balance can change. That's why many times when you see cars changing from dry tyres to wet tyres, you'll see the mechanics adjusting the front wing to change the aero balance to allow for the difference in tyres.
Non-stop rain throughout the entire race is fairly unlikely. The teams therefore keep the dry setup kit at the ready. For as soon as the rain stops, the track starts to dry. The high running temperatures wear down the soft wet weather tires. Speed drops and the strains on the car increase. Correct timing of the tire change is called for once again.
What you gain with a wet setup in the wet is nowhere near how much you would lose using those same settings on a dry track. So generally speaking, from a race engineering strategy point of view, you're actually better off to leave the car very, very close to its dry settings for a wet race, because it won't be wet for the whole time and you will gain more from doing that. You would lose more from having a specific wet setup.
It's totally different in normal road traffic. Here it's a case of one setup for all conditions, tires included. The best possible grip must be assured on both dry and particularly wet surfaces.
This
is achieved with these tires by the fact that they have a very high proportion of negative tread, in other words, lots of grooves, especially these 4 main ones, through which water is dispersed to the rear. Then there are channels between the grooves and short ones leading outwards that also help to disperse as much water as possible as efficiently as possible. The tire can thus clear away up to 25 liters of water per second. Beware, slippery when wet. Whose grip is the best and the safest? Racing in the rain, a performance of a very special kind. And now, Formula One in Japan 30 years ago. The Formula One World Championship in 1979 was not decided until the final race at the foot of Mount Fuji in Japan. It was supposed to be the duel between Niki Lauda in Ferrari and James Hunt in McLaren. From the outset for the drivers, it was a slippery affair and quite literally a race where much was unclear. It was bucketing down. Mario Andretti led the field in pole position, with James Hunt on 2 and Niki Lauda on 3. Despite the rain, the drivers risk everything right on the start-finish straight. Side by side, the cars tear towards the first corner. Lauda forces his way past Mario Andretti. Hunt sticks close behind, and with lurching rear end, holds second position. However, the monsoon-like downpour decides the outcome. On the second lap, with his Ferrari fully intact, Lauda heads into the pits. For him, the risk is irresponsible. Quite understandable after he'd narrowly escaped death on the Nürburgring. A total of 14 cars failed to end the race due to technical defects. Hunt's teammate Jochen Mass felt the wrath of the wet track more than most and was the only driver in this race to have an accident. He ran his McLaren Ford M23 into the crash barriers and had to retire on lap 35. Excitement for James Hunt as his tyres are being changed. Mario Andretti moves up unhindered into first place. Hunt knows that he has to finish at least third to get amongst the points and so secure the World Championship title. It's all or nothing. Once back on the track, Hunt forces his way up through the field. To everyone's surprise, he does it, and a lap behind Andretti crosses the finishing line in third. Patrick Depailler takes second in the twin-axle Tyrrell Ford. What had been mocked at the start of the season as a technical gimmick had proven itself and achieved excellent results over the course of the season. Now, as then, luck clearly has a huge part to play. In 1976, it was James Hunt and McLaren who had it. For such a turbulent season with lots of disqualifications and protests of every kind, wild celebrations were no surprise. By giving up, Niki Lauda had practically left the way clear for Hunt to win the title. Ferrari had to be satisfied with the Constructors' Championship. Japan 1976. First Andretti ahead of Depailler. Third, the world champion James Hunt. For James Hunt, it was to be the first and only time he'd hold aloft his own World Championship trophy. Time again for our news and facts. Is this how Formula One races will look in the future? To make the Grand Prix more exciting, Flavio Briatore has now had an unusual idea: Formula One races at night. He presumably imagined it's something like this. Pure romance, the race starts straight into the blazing sunset. And when it gets really dark, they simply switch the spotlights on, like at parties. After all, you do want to be seen. The senior partner of Formula One is retiring. At the age of 40, Olivier Panis is stepping away from Formula One. The qualified vehicle mechanic has featured since 1994. In 2004, he drove 17 races for Toyota, and since 2005, he's been testing the cars for the Japanese team. The Frenchman celebrated his greatest triumph in 1996 with a victory at the Monaco Grand Prix for the Ligier team. Au revoir, Olivier Panis. Now we come back to the hardest braking point on the demanding track in Suzuka. The Brembo brake engineers have identified that braking is really tough just before the start-finish in the Casio Triangle corner. The cars reach that point at 310 km an hour. They brake down hard to 90 within 2.2 seconds. The drivers are subjected to forces of 4.6 G. That was Inside Grand Prix. We'll be back for the next Grand Prix in Brazil.